He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with over 27 years of experience. Together, Henry and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. We're back with another episode, Henry. Today, we're going to change direction just a little bit. We've been reviewing creative briefs the last few episodes. Today, we're going to go back and find some ads that we really like. And instead of reviewing them, we're going to do a reverse engineering exercise and see if we can figure out the brief, which I think is a great teaching tool that all of us should do to hone our creative brief writing skills. So we did a little digging. We found some classic and some not so classic ads, and we're going to try to we'll pick out a few of these as we go. But we found one that we really liked. It's on a website called Empire. And this one breaks down by category. This is for Band-Aid. It's called theempire.com, and they break it down by product category. This one is for what is it called here? I forget what it is. Here it is. Cosmetic and hygiene print ads. This is the first one. And we have what I guess, and I think we both agree, is a very familiar image, but we noticed that it's not identified, not directly. So we all know that we know that this is the Hulk, and we know what happens to the Hulk when the character of the Hulk, Mr. Bruce Banner, gets pissed off or someone hurts him.
He
gets him upset.
metamorphizes into the Hulk.
Yeah, the guy clearly needs, anger management training, but that would basically kill the plot line of the whole show. So that's never going to happen. So what is clever about this ad, of course, is this is the after. He's been pissed off, and look what happens, or rather what didn't happen, to the Band-Aid. So what we're going to do today is answer 5 questions. We're going to try to figure out the brief, and we'll write a draft for the brief too, which we'll post along with this episode. We're going to answer these 5 questions. Why are they advertising? Or, what's the problem that they're trying to solve? Who are they talking to? And then we're going to do our classic shift. What do people think now before they would see this communication? And once they've seen this communication, what would we like them to think? And then the 5th question is, what's the single-minded proposition? So you want to take a stab at this, Henry? You want to get started? What do you and we don't have to do these questions in any particular order. We can just do what kind of comes to our thinking. Where would you like to start on this one?
So first of all, before we get into the brief, I think I want to comment a little bit on the end ad.
Okay.
And what to make sure that you're seeing what I'm seeing. And I think it's a brilliant ad, right? So
we agree.
First of all, it does require some work for you to figure out like what's going on in the ad, right? And then what you see is this Hulk hand, and you wonder, well, why does he have a Band-Aid on? And then you see at the bottom is the Band-Aid box that says flexible fabric. And then you realize, oh, and just like the caption here in the website says, he had this Band-Aid on before he turned into the Hulk. And if you're familiar with the Hulk, which this ad is banking on you being familiar with the Hulk, you know that when he turns into he bursts out of his shirt, out of his pants. Like, guys, Bruce Banner's got to have a new wardrobe every week because he's bursting out of clothes. But the Band-Aid stretches because it's made of a flexible fabric. So it's very clever. And to your point, there's no Hulk intellectual property really used here. It's a green, muscular, like bodybuilder's hand. But it doesn't say Incredible Hulk anywhere. These aren't Hulk Band-Aids, branded Band-Aids. So conceivably, they paid $0 for usage of this implied character endorsement because they never show his face. It's just this muscular hand with a Band-Aid, happens to be green. So I think it's a brilliant ad. It does require a little bit of work, but it's one of those that when you get it, you're like, oh yeah, that's really, really clever. And I think that's the kind of advertising that most people don't resent and don't hate. You and I were talking off the air before about like not wanting to see advertising and how you avoid it now.
Right.
But when you see clever advertising, it doesn't bother you. It's actually part of the entertainment, whatever it is, in this case, a magazine that you're flipping through.
Well,
So I
the sad truth is though, Henry, how often do we see really brilliant stuff like
no,
this? It's pretty rare.
that's the point, is,
Yeah,
like Dave Trout would say, something like 94% of it is shit. So
I would go higher, but
yeah,
that's just
yeah.
me.
So in any
Well,
case,
this to me, I mean, to your point, this to me it demonstrates what my first creative director, the one that I learned the most from, Tom Jordan, now retired from Hoffman York and Compton in Milwaukee, used to tell me and all the other creatives: draw the circle, but don't complete it. Trust the audience, which is a throwback to what David Ogilvy used to say: never underestimate the intelligence of your audience. You do so at your peril. So it does require a bit of work. It might have required the agency to do some persuasive talking to get the client to go with this. Maybe not, but I think the reward is worth the risk.
yeah. So if we were looking at the brief and we said, well, why are we advertising? As a strategist, the story of Band-Aid, I think everybody kind of has it as one of those shorthands that we know there are product brand names that become synonymous with the product regardless of the manufacturer, right? So adhesive bandages is technically what these are, but everybody calls them Band-Aids, whether they buy the generic ones or the actual Johnson and Johnson Band-Aid brand one. So that's a double-edged sword, right? When become so synonymous with a product that everybody uses that name, even when they're not buying your actual brand. So it speaks to how big the brand is in people's minds, but also speaks to that now it's become a generic name for an adhesive bandage. So you could see why they would be wanting to differentiate, right? Like, what makes the original Band-Aid brand better than the store brand or some generic or other knockoff brand of adhesive bandage? So to me, the why are we advertising is to create desire for the actual Band-Aid brand, as opposed to just the generic adhesive bandage category.
So this sets the try to set the category apart. I mean, I can't think of another brand just off the top of my head, a Band-Aid, even though I know there are others out there.
Well,
The,
there's the generic drugstore brand. I know there's another brand that I can't remember right now.
but that's my
Uh,
point. I mean, even you're making my point for me. This could be a category ad, and they're trying to break through the category ad to say, "Remember our brand," and they're
yes,
doing it, no pun intended, in a very big way.
absolutely, absolutely. Like, I think people automatically, if we didn't have the box at the bottom, we would think Band-Aid, but that
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily mean we would buy Band-Aid,
right.
right? So I think this is really about differentiating or differentiating again the Band-Aid brand from its no name and low name competitors. Um,
I mean,
and
think of what we were talking about recently when we were interviewing Sarah Walker Hall and discussing the Kiwi brief. Kiwi is the category owner of shoe polish to the point where we can't name a competitor. So you don't want to do a category ad. You want to distinguish it for that brand. This is the same challenge.
well, I think that the difference with Kiwi is it's a slightly higher priced item. I think there are just frankly fewer competitors. There isn't
Mm.
a generic shoe polish out there that you would get, whereas Band-Aids are something that's disposable, right? It's just like you need it to do what it does, which is cover the wound for a day or two, and they get nasty and you got to change them every few hours or every day or whatever. And so I think that they were where Kiwi, I think their problem was people were paying less and less attention to their shoes, and therefore their entire category was going down, and they were trying to grow the category. Here, the number of times you're going to use a Band-Aid isn't going to change over the course of the year because of the advertising, right? Like I'm not going to spur you to cut yourself so that you could use the product. So there's a bit
Well,
of
I
a
don't know,
difference.
Henry. I've heard some stories about you, Henry. I'm not sure about that.
So the question here is how do we get people to choose us when they are in the market for a bandage, right? For an adhesive bandage. So I think that here it's like trying to reinstill some differentiation. And they're also, by the way, using through product innovation, right? So this isn't the standard Band-Aid. This is the flexible fabric flavor of the Band-Aid brand. And so I think it's using this innovation to differentiate itself from the other competitors that were out there that at the time didn't have that innovation.
Well, one of the questions I get when I do my training, and I haven't used this ad, and I might start to use it because it is a clever ad and it provokes conversation. But one of the questions I would get for an ad like this, where it's done by a category leader, is, yeah, but you could put any Band-Aid brand in that little lower right-hand corner and it would still work. Why? What makes this unique to the Band-Aid brand?
Well, like I said, number one, they are number one. So if I'm brand X adhesive bandage and I do this, people are going to associate it with Band-Aid. So that's
Yeah.
number one. Unless I find a real way to differentiate myself, I that's going to happen. And then the other thing is, again, with these big package goods companies, what you ultimately have is you have a product, you introduce it, it gets successful, it gets copied. And then to stay ahead of the copycats, you have to introduce new SKUs, new variables, new variants of that product with the promise. This is an old promise, if we're talking about old advertising, it's like new and improved, right? The new and improvement here is that the fabric is flexible. And so the fabric being flexible provides a series of benefits. And here's one that we're never going to take advantage of because the reality is we're not going to become the Hulk, but we are going to get a cut on a joint, right? That we need
Yeah.
it to be flexible. We are going to get a cut in a place that moves around. And so the ideal would be for the Band-Aid to be able to be flexible. So I think that this is what we're seeing here. This is potentially, and I don't know the year of this, potentially a launch of this specific variety of Band-Aid.
Right. Okay. Number two, who are we talking to? One of the things I encounter when I do my training and when I write about briefs is the tendency is to try to talk to everybody, and the failure or the weakness of even making that attempt is that you end up talking to no one. You have to talk to a very specific person, a single person who can be representative or universal. Do you agree with that thinking? And if so, how would you go about answering the question, who are we
Yeah.
talking to here?
I mean, I think, without having worked in this category or this, particular product, I just use my strategist thought process to say, okay, who buys Band-Aids? And the truth is probably the vast majority are moms.
Moms. Yep. I was just going to say.
They're responsible. That one, they're in the drugstore more frequently than dads. Two, they have to take care of the kids and the dad, right? So that they're kind of like the healthcare CEO of the household, and they're also the ones that tend to be in the retail channels where we would buy these adhesive bandages. So I think the category is moms, and then the question is, how do we want to romance that target description? And maybe it is something like that. She's the chief medical officer of the family, responsible for taking care of everybody's well-being. She's in the drugstore frequently, sometimes as many as times as twice a week, picking up odds and ends, snacks, beauty items, and yes, health items and medication for herself and the whole family. She's uh not necessarily interested in the things that her kid is interested in, but she knows what her kid is interested in, right? Which might be a starting to lead us toward how we might end up with like an Incredible Hulk
Well,
ad, right? Like,
I was gonna ask that as kind of a devil's advocate. Why do you think that the client or the agency might think that the Incredible Hulk? Because I agree with you 100%. This is to moms, but why do you think the agency and or the client would connect or see that the Incredible Hulk would resonate with moms? I have my own answer for it, but I want to hear what you have to say.
so my answer is I think she has to recognize it, and I don't think you have to be a fan of comic books or TV, 70s, 80s TV shows or the comic book superhero movies that are out now to know that the Hulk exists, right? And to kind of know what the story is there. So it's in the popular culture. And on top of that, I think a mom would know. Listen, I hate superhero comic book movies. This is like a personal pet peeve of mine. I think it's the infantilization of American adults, particularly men. I think it's also a bad sign for Hollywood that they can't come up with something that wasn't created 75 years ago in a comic book and just keep rehashing it and doing sequels. So I hate this stuff.
100% agreement.
But
100% agreement.
but unfortunately, my daughter loves this stuff. So that's my curse. That's how God decided to curse me, is that my daughter, not my son, my daughter loves Marvel comic book things. She tells me what's DC, what's Marvel, and this one and the Flash, and I sit there. She's telling me like, and she's at an age where she gets going, and you can't stop her. And I tell her, I said, that I don't like this stuff, right? And she laughs and she keeps telling me about it. So I think a mom would recognize this through her child and see it through the child's eyes.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I guess I would add to that by saying moms recognize, especially adult males, for the babies that we really are. We scratch our toe and all of a sudden we're incapacitated. We get a cold, and we turn into big old babies. So I think what you said combined with that recognition, I think makes this work brilliantly. So we know it's moms. Okay, so our shift, what do they think now? Well, let's just assume this. What do moms think now about Band-Aids or the category of Band-Aids? And then we'll go to what would we want them to think after seeing this? So how would you start that? What do they think
So
now?
to me, this is the easiest part of the brief. If you interviewed 100 women, a majority of them would say all Band-Aids are the same.
Yeah.
That's what they think now. And by the way, I would specifically use Band-Aid without the copyright, trademark, whatever, because they're thinking of it as generic Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Right. So it's all Band-Aids are the same.
I don't agree. I mean, I don't disagree. That's absolutely it. They're all the same. They haven't thought about it at all. And that's a danger for the brand. So let's try what do we want them to think? Is it just, oh, they're not all the same? Is it as
So
simple as that?
what I would want them to come out of the ad is with some sort of recognition that about real Band-Aids. Uh, so I'm workshopping it in my mind as worth it, but it would be something like real Band-Aids are worth it.
Yeah,
Meaning, now I'm not talking about Band-Aids generically. I'm talking about the Johnson and Johnson Band-Aid brand is worth it. So if it costs 50 cents more for the box or 79 cents more for the box, I'm going to do it because it's worth it.
I agree. I wouldn't add a word to that. What do you think the single-minded proposition is?
That's a tough one.
It is.
Without getting salesy, right? Because you could very easily fall into the trap of new Band-Aid brand, flexible fabric, adhesive bandages, blah, 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 some promise. And I think we'd want something pithy. um, you know, and something that would lead them to that idea of real band-aids. Um, so I don't know. Something like real band-aids for your real life, for your real life, right?
Okay.
Real band-aids for your real life. And then the interesting thing about that, by the way, is if you put that in there as real band-aids for your real life, and again, this is off the top of my head. I haven't sat down and really thought about this. But if you did something like that, look at the ad. The ad isn't about real life,
Not at
right?
all.
This is a fictional, but there's an implication here of, in this fictional world, this band-aid, look at what it does because it's flexible. This is actually really practical in your real life, right? This is by putting it in this superhero world where it performs in your real life, where you need it to, just because it's on the joint or whatever, it's going to work. So I kind of like that a creative would subversively take it out of the real world into a fake world that makes the real world more real, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now we have the benefit of seeing the result. And so we can kind of, that's what we call it, a reverse engineering exercise, which makes our job a little bit easier because we don't have to do the work to come up with the idea. But as a creative looking at this, I want to have a little fun with it because I'm trying to be inspired. I want to kick the butts of the creatives to do this. So my first, without even thinking, my first thought was real band-aids are not a stretch.
Yeah. Good.
I don't know.
Or are a stretch.
Yeah, you could do the negative or the positive. And
Real band-aids, they're a stretch. And it could mean both. It's, you're gonna stretch a little more money, but it's because they stretch that you're gonna wanna,
there are a
that
lot
you're,
of levels. There are a lot of levels
yeah,
you can, is
yeah.
it worth the stretch for a few more pennies to get a really good band-aid? Yeah, it is.
Band-aids are worth the stretch.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are some
Band-aids that are worth
iterations.
the stretch. That's a good single-minded headlining
Yeah.
proposition.
Yeah. And see when we collaborate here, Henry, it's we come up with something even better.
100%. That's why creative teams usually come in pairs.
Absolutely. That's what I've been advocating for years, for years. Okay. Okay. We wrote a brief. I think we've got the start of it. What we'll do is I've been taking notes for those. I don't think I've been on screen. You can see me doing it, but I'm taking notes, and we're going to polish this, and we'll include this with our final discussion about it. And we've got ourselves a brief. Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach, and together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.